There's a certain kind of exhaustion that comes from carrying everything alone. Not physical exhaustion, the emotional kind. The kind where your mind never fully relaxes because part of you feels responsible for handling everything quietly, privately, and without depending on anyone else. You may not even realize how automatic it has become. Someone asks if you're okay, and you instantly say, "I'm fine." You struggle silently for weeks before mentioning anything. You spend hours trying to solve problems alone, even when support is available. And even during difficult moments, asking for help feels strangely uncomfortable. Not impossible, just emotionally heavy. Because for some people, asking for help does not feel neutral. It feels vulnerable. And vulnerability can feel dangerous when your brain learned early that emotional needs were not always safe to express. Sometimes this pattern begins with pride. You want to be capable, independent, reliable. You want to prove that you can survive on your own. But often, the behavior goes deeper than personality. Sometimes people become hyper-independent because somewhere in their past, relying on others led to disappointment. Maybe your emotions were ignored. Maybe vulnerability was judged. Maybe you learned that needing support made you feel weak, embarrassed, or emotionally exposed. So over time, your nervous system adapts. Instead of depending on people, you depend on yourself. Not because it feels good, because it feels safer. Psychologists often describe this as a protective coping mechanism. When emotional support feels inconsistent, the brain begins minimizing emotional dependence to avoid future pain. And eventually, self-reliance stops being a choice. It becomes survival. What makes this difficult to recognize is that society constantly praises independence. People admire the person who handles everything alone, the person who never complains, the person who stays emotionally composed under pressure. But emotional self-containment has a hidden cost. Humans are not designed to process every emotional experience alone. Your nervous system actually regulates itself through safe connection with other people. This is why emotional isolation often increases anxiety, overthinking, and mental exhaustion. The brain was built for co-regulation. Calm nervous systems help calm other nervous systems. Support matters biologically, not just emotionally. But if someone spent years believing they had to manage everything alone, receiving help can start feeling uncomfortable instead of comforting. You overthink whether you're becoming a burden. You apologize for expressing emotions. You feel guilty, needing reassurance. You replay vulnerable conversations, afterward wondering if you shared too much. Because emotionally self-reliant people often treat vulnerability like risk assessment. Your brain carefully calculates how much of yourself feels safe to reveal. And after enough years, emotional protection starts looking like personality. People describe you as quiet, reserved, independent, hard to read. But sometimes those traits are not natural personality features. Sometimes they are emotional armor. There's also another hidden layer beneath this behavior: control. When you rely only on yourself, life feels more predictable. You don't have to wonder whether someone will disappoint you, misunderstand you, or emotionally disappear when you need them most. Self-reliance creates certainty, and certainty calms anxious nervous systems. This is why many hyper-independent people become extremely competent. They prepare excessively. They solve problems quickly. They become the dependable one in every situation. Not always because they enjoy responsibility, but because depending on others feels emotionally unsafe. Sometimes competence becomes protection. If I can handle everything myself, nobody can hurt me. But carrying life this way creates quiet loneliness. Not obvious loneliness, functional loneliness. The kind where you appear completely fine externally while internally feeling emotionally unsupported. And over time, this becomes exhausting because the pressure is not only coming from life itself. It's coming from constantly holding yourself together without emotional release. Many emotionally independent people secretly want support very deeply. They want understanding, safety, closeness, but at the same time, their nervous system distrusts dependence. So they experience two opposite desires at once. I want someone to help me. I should handle this alone. And living between those emotional states creates internal tension. This is especially common in people who learned emotional self-reliance very early in life. Children who felt emotionally unsupported often grow into adults who struggle asking for help even when safe people finally exist around them. Not because their needs disappeared, but because expressing needs once felt unsafe. So instead of vulnerability, the brain develops alternative survival strategies: overthinking, overworking, emotional withdrawal, handling problems silently, becoming the strong one. But eventually, emotional suppression catches up with the body. Mental burnout, chronic tension, difficulty relaxing, emotional numbness, constant overthinking, because emotions do not disappear when ignored. The nervous system still carries them quietly in the background. And perhaps the most painful part of this pattern is that many hyper-independent people secretly believe they're easier to love when they need less. So they minimize themselves emotionally. They become low maintenance, self-contained, emotionally careful, not because they truly have no needs, but because somewhere in their past, needing too much may have felt dangerous. And once the brain learns that lesson deeply enough, asking for help can trigger shame instead of comfort. Not logical shame, emotional shame. The kind your nervous system reacts to automatically before your conscious mind even understands why. But healing often begins with one important realization. Your independence may not only be strength. It may also be protection. And protection is useful until it starts preventing connection. Because real strength is not forcing yourself to carry every emotional burden alone. Real strength is slowly teaching yourself that safe support exists. That vulnerability is not weakness. That needing comfort does not make you a burden. And that you were never meant to survive life entirely on your own.